I always forget how to close the thing at the end. So, all right. So yes, as Richard said, I am going to be talking about OWIN. So OWIN stands for the Open Web Interface for .NET. It's a very useful and descriptive acronym, and it also seems like someone just wanted to make OWIN sound cool. So let's just kind of start with the basics of this is a very basic HTTP server written in Node.js. It starts off with you import something, so some way that you're going to start up a server. In this case, it's a HTTP module available in Node. Tell it we want to create a new server, and then we're going to have a function that is executed every time a request and a response comes in. So the way this will work is the server will start up, and every request, regardless of where you come from, will return the same response. It's a basic HTTP server, so this is as bare bones as you can kind of get, at least from a Node perspective. And the idea is that you're so close to the wire of what you're working with from a HTTP point of view that you can do a lot of customizations of this. You've got full control over we're setting content types for the response, status codes, all those kind of things that it can be very useful when you're wanting to work with the very basics of what a web server can do. So let's talk about .NET then. So if we think about we're creating a new .NET application, an ASP.NET application. So we got Visual Studio or the Express version. Take your pick. You've still got to install one of those two. Create an ASP.NET project. Say you want to just respond to any request that comes in. So you create a HTTP handler. You register that in your web config. You then tell that to deploy to either IIS or IIS Express. If you want that to go somewhere else, you then have to find hosting and hosting that supports IIS. It's a lot of layers that you're talking about here. First off, like just installing Visual Studio, you're already talking something that is a very foreign concept to people that are freelancers or just trying to get into development. Like, what do you mean? I've got to go out and get this several $1,000s worth of product, or this very large and potentially confusing free IDE. It's not a kind of a easy starting point to someone that might be new to web development. Not when we compare it to what we've got here, that I could paste this into a text file in Notepad, save it, and then run that through Node.js. Sure, I've still got to install Node.js. Sure, I've got to have Notepad installed, but you're probably not on Windows if you don't have Notepad installed. But it's a lot simpler to do what would be the same thing. Yeah. So that's kind of like, yeah, you want to start a web server that just responds with hello world to everything with a 200 status. You've got to install Visual Studio. You've got to create a new project. You've got to be able to set up a HTTP handler. You've got to register that in your web config. You might want to remove some of the other HTTP handlers and modules depending on what you're wanting. You've got to then deploy that to some kind of a server. Cool. Chuck Norris thinks it's awesome. So it's a lot of work to kind of set this stuff up if you're just wanting something really, really basic. Like, APIs are all the rage now because we just do everything in JavaScript on the client, and that's awesome, isn't it? Yeah. But this is kind of the world we've been in, like building these applications that have got large frameworks behind them. So is it really a problem? So here's a couple of scenarios that I thought of while I was putting together these thoughts, these slides. So, say you just want an API. The example of, we just want to respond with the same status and response text for every single request that comes in. Not particularly useful, but there's someone out there that wants that from their application. Not sure who they are, not sure what they're doing, but that's what they want. They don't need things like a view engine. Like, we don't need Razor or ASPX or any of the various view engines on any of the other platforms. I just need HTTP endpoints that someone can query and that I can get a response back and I can do something with that response. I probably don't care about the HTTP pipeline. I don't need, if we're talking ASP.NET Web Forms, I don't need the page lifecycle. If I'm talking MVC, do I really need all the modules that are executed before a controller action is even invoked? So these are a lot of layers that go through that it just kind of magically happens under the hood that your framework will take care of but are they needed for every single application that you're going to be building on the web? And what if you want to build a standalone web server that's kind of embedded in something? This could be a Windows service that is deployed onto a server somewhere. What if you wanted to have that as you just wanted to write this as HTTP, and the deployment of that is taken care of by someone else? It might be deployed as a web service on an actual server through IIS. It might be embedded into a rich client application. It might be embedded as a Windows service. Any of these things could be options depending on the needs of the application you're building. But really, I'm at the moment only concerned about how someone is communicating with these HTTP endpoints. So this is OWIN. This is the source code for OWIN.dll. If you go to the GitHub repository, that's all there is. There is one CS file. It contains that. There's probably like a C# project file and a solution file and a git ignore file or something like that. But this is all it compiles down to. It is just a single interface called iAppBuilder that has properties, has a use statement, a build that allows you to create new app builders. Create middlewares from app builders, and I'll talk about middlewares later, and then the ability to create new instances of this from an existing instance of this interface. So we're really talking very bare bones HTTP stuff on the .NET stack. This is all you really need to be able to create what we're looking back at in Node. So we've got properties, which are request response information, using to say here's setting up a new route that we're going to be listening to, or just any route we could pass in there. The build and new are something that are a bit more unique to this implementation, but they still can be very useful in the basis of building a simple HTTP server and application. So if you want to get started with OWIN, there's a couple of different ways. There's Katana, which I'll touch on at the end. Or you can do File, New Console Application in Visual Studio. You can install this NuGet package, Microsoft.owin.self-host. It's actually a pre-release NuGet package at the moment. I think there is a version 1.0 package, but that's quite outdated. Version 2 is still in pre-release, so you need -pre flag. And now it's time to get onto our demo. Get out of that folder. So, net. So let's start with a simple server. So touch dot. So I'm going to use Scriptsharp for this. So just to kind of really illustrate the point of you don't need all these really large tools to build a simple web server on the .NET platform. I'm going to use Scriptsharp and Sublime. So I will start that up. I will close that one off because that's my demo code. And we don't need to see the finished product already. So I'll have an app CSX. If anyone hasn't used Scriptsharp before, it's a wrapper around Roslyn, essentially. Allows you to execute C# from the command line, which is kind of cool. There's a whole bunch of other uses for it, and it's an entirely different talk on its own, so I will stop talking about it there. But all that matters is I can write C# in a text editor and then execute it. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do, as I said, is we need to install this NuGet package. Unfortunately, you can't actually install that NuGet package for Scriptsharp, and that's a limitation of NuGet itself. This package doesn't include anything other than a bunch of references to other NuGet packages, and you can't use NuGet packages that are classed as project level packages outside of Visual Studio. So you have to kind of add the NuGet packages explicitly, and conveniently I have done that already. Whoops. Oh, you shitty Snagit. Okay, so wait. No.
You recorded that.
Yeah, I know. Thanks, Snagit, for taking hotkeys and just installing them globally. Command palette, that's what I want. Nope. Snippets. So let me just find my package. Package snippet. There it is. Okay, so That's really going to get annoying. And we're going to continuously hear me sigh throughout the rest of this recording as I keep pressing the shortcut key the Snagit has installed. Huh? Okay. Ah, that's what happens when you read the dialogues, kids. He's me just like, it's not working, I'm just bashing the keyboard and make the things go away. And Rich is taking the time to actually read what the pop-up says. He's like, you're an idiot. Just pay attention to do what it says. Anyway, so these are the five NuGet packages that will be installed by the self-host package. As I said, because you can't run it from the just NuGet.exe. We're going to have to do these manually. So I just create myself a package, .config. So we install OWIN, which is that one CS file essentially that had up before. And then we've got some other helpers on top of it that Microsoft have done to make working with OWIN a little bit easier. So touch on what they do kind of as we come to them. So I will just install those packages and hope the network stays up, and that should kick off. Nothing to install. It's because I can't spell packages. There we go. Now let's just install those. Come on. I'll leave that running in the background. And okay, so the first thing that you're going to need to do when building an OWIN application is create some kind of config. So this is kind of like our the function that we're passing through to the HTTP server in Node.js. So now I'll go find my scaffold snippet. Okay, so I've included two references, one to OWIN because I need the IApp builder interface, and one to Microsoft.owin.hosting because I didn't want to have to type that out later. So this config is where we start defining the routes that would be listening to on our HTTP server. Now I have to remember which one this will be. Whoops. And now the description, C#. I don't actually remember what all my snippets were called. Yeah, that was really awesome, wasn't it? There we go. Okay, so before we actually start creating any routes, we want to start our web server. So here I'm telling, so I need web app that comes from Microsoft.owin.hosting. Web app, I want to tell it to start. I want to use this particular configuration. So OWIN is very heavily built around the concept of convention over configuration. So it will expect the class that you're passing in will be a type that it can construct. So it's got a default constructor. It will expect that there is a public void method on there called configuration that takes an IApp builder as an argument. I think it will have issues if you try and have any other arguments in there. I haven't looked too deeply into it. But what it will do is it will take that class that we've defined on line 4. It will then execute the configuration method in there, and it will then start a server at the address that we've passed in. So I've explicitly said that I want this on localhost port 3000. You can do it on just like a star binding. So I want it on HTTP, any IP address that's bound to this machine and this particular port. I don't know if you can do multiple URLs, multiple ports that you want to start on. I didn't look that deeply into it, but there's a good chance that you can. Once that starts, so that's a disposable object. Once that starts, I just writing out something to the console, and then basically doing something to tell it to not execute this, not finish the execution. So in this case, I'm just using a read line, just waiting for that. So until I hit enter, my server will be up and running. So if we run that, just open up a new window, wait for it to spin up. Speedy. Come on. Why is this slow? Yeah, if only I had a Haswell. There we go. Okay, so now we're up and running. So HTTP localhost. Yep. Oh, come on. Bloody PowerShell. Okay, so it's going, all right, cool. I can ping out to that, but there's nothing there. I haven't defined any routes yet. It's a 404. I haven't got anything for it to listen to. Server's still up and running though. So now let's define a route and snippets. So let's see if I can guess what my snippet was, which I probably can't. No, I can. There we go. Okay. So this is a simple route. So there's a couple of extension methods that are added by the Microsoft.OWIN stack. So one of them is this use that I'm using here. So in this case, I don't actually have to pass through middleware or anything like that. All I'm doing is, here is a Lambda statement that I want to execute on every request that happens. So in this case, so what gets passed in is a HTTP context. So this is similar to the HTTP context you're used to in ASP.NET applications. This will come through as an interface, OWIN context, I believe it is. It might be one level up, which is the Microsoft wrapper around that, which will then expose HTTP request, response, environment variables, and a bunch of other stuff. From the context, so this method then needs to return a task object, so it's asynchronous by default. So here I'm just saying I want to write something asynchronously to the response. Because I'm not setting up anything else, it's going to assume that it's a plain text response, it's a 200, and a whole bunch of other things that you might want to set up as configurations on the response that's going down. But in this case, I just want a basic text, a block of text written out, which is hello from OWIN. So we'll start up our server again. It was not this slow last night when I was testing it. Maybe because I'm running off battery. Let me just see if I can. No, high performance, whatever. Okay, now if I curl that, so this time you'll see, here we go. I've got a response of hello OWIN. It's 200. It's a chunk transfer encoding. Anyone that's really into HTTP protocols will understand why that's cool. Basically, it means we can keep writing to it. I haven't explicitly ended the response, so I could keep writing to it if I wanted to. The response is still open, but for the vast majority of users that's kind of uninteresting. But there we go. That's a HTTP server that if I was to go foo, it's returning me the exact same thing. Alt net. So we get exactly the same thing every single time we get a response down. Kind of useful, kind of not really useful. So let's have a look at my next slide. So what if we want to talk about routing? I mean, MVC applications, web APIs, REST, everything now is built on the concept of the different verbs have semantic meanings. So do gets, you'll be retrieving resources, posts, puts for modifying data, deletes for removing, patch, etc. So how are we going to deal with these? Well, the context has a request property, as I mentioned before. So the request then has a method on. So that method will be get, post, put, delete, etc. But do you really want to be writing in this single lambda statement? These continuously writing these. If it's this method, then we'll do this, and that stuff gets kind of clunky. And what if we wanted to deal with different URLs? As you saw there, every single URL we pass through it was just going to go, yep, here's the exact same response. So that's really not going to be particularly useful if you've got static files on disk. You have CSS and JavaScript and images. Like, you don't really need to return a plain text response for those. You want to return the appropriate files from disk. And you obviously are going to want to do different things based on the routes. So this is where the concept of routing starts coming in, and we want to be able to build on the top of what we've got of a basic HTTP server and start adding some routing. So come back here, and I'm pretty sure I know this one. Nope. Damn it. Route. No snippets. I meant to actually rename these to just numerical ordering so I knew where I needed to be, but you know, that would have been snippet. Here we go. Okay, so if we wanted to build a basic HTTP route, this is actually provided to us by the Microsoft.OWIN.hosting extensions. So they provide us with a map extension method, and that map just sits on the app builder that we get passed in and allows us to provide us with a path that we want to map, and then inside of that we essentially start a new configuration context. So here we would listen to here I can set up a use statement such as I'm doing here. So map foo, and then inside of that I want to do something different. So we will just start up our little web server again. This is a whole lot cooler when my demos didn't take like 30 seconds to start up. Man, there's like 5 lines of code, come on. Okay, so if I hit my /altnet route, I still get hello from OWIN. If I was to go to /foo, hit hey foo. If I was to change my method to post instead of get, I still get hey foo because it's gone into that separate config there. And inside of that, I can start controlling the routing a bit more specifically. So when the foo method comes in, when a request comes to foo, I can do different things based off of the HTTP method that someone has requested. So let's have a look at how we could start doing that. So I'll just create a new file and save this as app. Save this as app builder extensions. So I've created some extension methods on the top of, probably actually need OWIN in there. No, don't worry about that. So I've created an extension method, or Scriptshop actually can't create extension methods like you do in Visual Studio because it runs through Roslyn, and because it runs through Roslyn, it wraps every class inside of another class, and extension methods have to be top level of the namespace. So that was an annoying bug that I found when I was writing these demos. So what I take in is the app builder as the first argument, like old school extension method approach. The path that I want to listen to this get method on, and then a handler that I want to execute when this matches. So inside of this, I return, that shouldn't be config, that should be builder. So I do builder.use, and then inside of this lambda, I will check the HTTP requests method. If it's a get method, I want to execute the handler that was given to me. Otherwise, I want to use this second argument that I haven't talked about yet, which is next. So next allows me to say, no, I can't handle this. Go to the next part of the next function in the order of execution and see if it can do it. If it can't do it, keep going and keep going until either someone can deal with this request that's come in, or we hit the end of the stack and we just, like, the request is essentially terminated. So now let's have a look at how we can use that. Let's better import, load, builder. And snippet. I also decided to write a whole bunch of snippets for script C#, script CS this week. So now they're all the ones that are coming up, and I'm getting autocomplete on those, so that's getting annoying as well. It was if I didn't have those, it might be easier. Anyway, to use our extensions, I invoke the static class, call the get method, pass the builder in, pass the route that I want to listen to, and then provide it with the function that I want to execute. So come back here, just restart my server, and I'm going to be hitting bar. Waiting for the server to come up. Don't worry, we'll get these edits in post. It's all good. Okay, so this time, we get bar. Now if I was trying to method to post, you'll see we've fallen back to hello from OWIN. That's because we came into here, we've gone, well, we've matched on this path, we've got in this far, but I can't deal with this. Like, it doesn't match the URL that it doesn't match the HTTP method that you've requested from me. So we're just going to pass that through our next method, which by essentially order of execution means that the only thing that is capable of dealing with this is my use method at the bottom. So the very last one is the kind of thing you would put a 404 handler in. It's any request that's come in, nothing else has dealt with it. Okay, fine, that's a 404. No one has been able to deal with this. 404 that one out. So that's how you would start creating routing. You could obviously build this out to deal with posts and deletes and all the other HTTP methods and start making them more intelligent. You could also do some really interesting things. I've got a blog series on working with OWIN, and what you can do with routing and things like Express.js for Node, and I think Richard might cover this a bit more in his talk. If not, ask him to cover this in his talk, is that path you could pass in as a regular expression and then do like regex matching on top of the URLs that have been passed in. And then that makes your routing engine really powerful. So if the route comes in so that's kind of what the ASP.NET MVC routing engine does, and the Web API routing engine does. It's kind of loose regex based off of what's being passed in. So this can start getting really powerful. You can hide away the details of matching routes against handlers by using some extension methods, but still making it very simple to consume from the outside looking in. So I keep mentioning middleware as something that's kind of useful inside of an application. And this is when we start wanting to do things with requests that's not necessarily actually doing a response. Think about authentication. You've got a section of your application that you need an access token provided for, or a user needs to be logged in, or you just want to put HTTP logging on the requests that are coming into your application. That's the kind of thing that you would be doing with middleware. The links for Katana have an example of how to build a basic HTTP logging middleware. I think using Log4Net or something like that, and just before and after a request comes in and is handled, you just tell it to write out to a log file, and that's kind of the most basic concept of HTTP logging. But I thought let's have a look at building something slightly more complex. So I'll do a new file again and hope that I actually meant to do this in a new file, middleware. Okay, I did. Body. Okay, so say you've got a post request that comes in, and we want to deal with that, but like model binding in MVC understands what type that post that's come in is, and we want to be able to deal with that type as a strongly typed object. This is .NET after all, right? We don't want to be dealing with just a whole bunch of like reading and writing out of dictionaries, which is the core of OWIN. Right? If you're using just OWIN at its barest levels, you're just reading and writing from a dictionary. So I thought, well, how about doing a body parser? This will take a post. When a post comes in, we could turn that into a strongly typed .NET object that we can then pass through to our actual handlers. This is not going to be doing any response level functionality. All it's going to do is write out, modify the context that we're working with. So this is it's an abstract class that you've got to implement called OWIN middleware. It has a constructor that requires an OWIN middleware pass to it. So middlewares are executed in a sequential order. So you can have multiple middlewares fired for a particular request. So that's what the next argument that's passed to the constructor is. It will come in, and then you have to implement the invoke method, which then returns a task, or you can execute this asynchronously. Again, Roslyn actually doesn't support the async keywords. At least I couldn't get it to work last night at like 10 o'clock, and was like, yeah, that's me done. But the important thing is you call this.next.invoke, or next.invoke, and then pass through the context. So that tells it to execute the next level down of our middleware chain. So this middleware is not yet doing anything interesting. So let's do a snippet of middleware 2. You can see I started making a numerical. Didn't get particularly far. Okay. So I am making some assumptions here that this is only going to be used in a post. So in here you could do some checks of like gets and look at query string parameters and turn those query string parameters into objects. This case I'm just assuming it's a post, so I'm going to be reading the request's body. That comes through as a stream, so turn that into a stream reader and convert that into a string. So now if I was to say go body, save that, and now I'm pretty sure I'm doing things out of order, so things are going to get bad. Parser.css. Now, middleware. Okay, so I will just return. Okay, so I'll just hack out some of this code so I can kind of illustrate what's happening. So here I'm doing a use. Oh, I think I've forgotten to register my middleware. It's not going to be the snippet I want. Whoops. So to register your middleware, it is builder dot middleware, I think it is. Where body parser. Alright, you know what? I'm just going to quickly look at my snippet set. Game, we'll get this in post. Look, seeing as we're running out of time and I've forgotten where it was. OWIN test 2. Alright. So, believe me when I say that I actually did write this last night, and let's start copy some code. So, we register our middleware by doing builder.use and passing through the type of middleware that we want to register. In this case, it's obviously body parser. I haven't yet written the class that's going to be for bar body, but I can write that very quickly. Look at this. Look how quickly it is to write. So this is going to assume that the model type has just got a single property called var on it. And now if I start this up. Pardon? Oh, yes. Good point. I could have seen how quickly the Roslyn compiler would have picked that one up. Start that up again. And now we're also getting to the limits of my PowerShell. So I was looking this up last night. That value equals. Is that right, Jason? Awesome. There we go. So that came through. The post happened. And if we have a look back here down the bottom, you'll see I logged out the body inside of my middleware. So that's exactly what was coming in through our body. If I did this of value 2 equals world. So we're building up the kind of body that you would get from a form post. This is coming through as what is it, the www-form-encoded, I think. Yeah, the default one. So again, like in here, you could do detection to whether or not it was a request sent up as a JSON body and then do JSON deserialization. But instead, I'm just going to assume that it's standard HTTP form body. Just remove some indenting and use some reflection to take that body, split it by the ampersand character, split them by the equal, so we get a key value pair, and then find all the properties on the model type and start assigning them the values that were submitted up inside of my post. The last thing I'm doing is context.set. So the OWIN context has a get and a set method that allows you to add things to it that don't have to be declared as properties. And so this is kind of just think temp data in MVC. So I'm just adding something that could be classed as temp data. So this is something that's available for the length of that request. So here I'm inserting the body that I've created from my model type. A cool exercise that you could do if you wanted to play with this idea a bit further is actually change the context to be your own base class and then have the form data represented as, say, a dynamic object. So that was available then straight off your context or off your request, wherever that seemed logical. That's what things like Node.js and Ruby do with a lot of their simple middleware layers, is they actually modify those objects with dynamic types, but because this is through Roslyn, we don't support dynamics yet. Okay, so now I will comment out that, and then just do plus form dot value. So all I'm doing is inside of my request, assuming this is a post, I didn't want to kind of hide this behind more extension methods, dealing with the an actual post extension method. So I'm doing the check in here. I then get the body, get my strongly typed model for this request back out, and then I can work with that. Start that back up. Come on. Nope, started yet. So much code to compile. So fast. There we go. So there we go. We received our post request. We had a strongly typed object that represents the request that's come in. So the form data that we've submitted up, we're able to deal with that and like persist that. If we were persisting it, like do whatever we would normally do, but with a strongly typed object. You see, we've just kind of built up from, we started with just a raw HTTP response, and we started building on top of that to ultimately get to the point where we're working with strongly typed representations of data being sent up from a client. So what's Katana, and what's it in relation to OWIN? If you want to talk very high level, Katana is OWIN. Katana is essentially Microsoft's series of extension methods on top of OWIN. OWIN is more of a not a framework, but a design approach to building building .NET web frameworks that are not specifically tied to a hosting platform. They aren't tied to IIS, which is what ASP.NET itself is. So Katana is the workings by Microsoft to kind of build that separation between ASP.NET as we know and have used for the last decade and IIS. So what's really cool is in .NET 4.5.1 or ASP.NET 4.5.1 and MVC 5, that's actually built on top of OWIN for at least the security parts of it. So one advantage of OWIN is because it's not tied to IIS and everything is built off of interfaces, it makes it a lot easier to do testing. So the entirely new security stack that's being written for MVC5 and assumingly then onwards is a lot easier to extend and a lot easier to write testing against. Katana also brings a whole bunch of extensions. So the Microsoft.OWIN namespaces are essentially Katana. Katana is just the code name for the project. And that's what gives us the things like some of the extensions on top of the app builder, an easy way to do our own middleware without having to like really bare metal middleware if you were trying to do it with just the iApp builder interface. So a lot of this stuff is what you get out of Katana, and you can use it if you just go file new file new ASP.NET application in Visual Studio 2013. And that's all, folks. I will quickly take questions and rebut them if I don't know the answer. Yep. So there's a couple of reasons why you would look at using it in the real world. One, if you wanted to decouple your hosting platform, you wanted to say deploy onto Mono. I don't know, Mono has other ways that it can host ASP.NET applications, but this is one way that you could do that. It decouples ASP.NET or a web app built on C# from IIS. The other is if you want really fine-grained control over what is happening in your HTTP pipeline. You don't need the things that ASP.NET is going to add for you. You don't need model binding, or you've just got simple responses and requests that you're dealing with. The final reason is if you had very esoteric ways that you wanted to host this. You wanted to host a web server inside of a process that is a Windows service or a WPF app. Those are the kind of things that this would be much more useful for to do that. Yeah.
So I've done a Windows service with a basic camera. We wanted basically just a very simple web interface. So we had a Windows service, one be able to turn it on and off with simple clicking button and have to do things or not. And we could have spun up a separate thing and had it do cross-process stuff, but we just used something like that to host a little service in there. You can browse it to it, get the page, on off, job done. Really simple, without having to then go into control panel and kill processes or anything. Just stop processing. That sort of thing there. But
for the foreseeable future, yeah, we're still going to have ASP.NET as you have used it for the last decade, and OWIN for those more specific scenarios that ASP.NET is not ideal for. There's a really good write-up for the reasoning behind Katana that links off the Codeplex, let's say GitHub, the Codeplex page for it. So Katana is actually open source, like everything the ASP.NET team has been doing recently. They basically said that ASP.NET started its life over a decade ago with a couple of very specific goals that the web had at that point in time. Those goals are no longer the primary drivers for building web applications. We don't have people that are writing classic ASP applications these days that we want to move into .NET. We don't have Windows Forms developers that we're trying to move into. We don't have as many of those yet that we're trying to move into .NET, and that's a lot of kind of the early thinkings behind of ASP.NET. Now, it's a very different webscape, and you kind of hope so after 10 years. And the fact that now Microsoft is like, well, we need to make sure that we're building a platform that can be up to the challenges of the next decade. and that's kind of where I see OWIN fitting in. Any other questions? What do you mean by a server push? Oh, so you mean like WebSockets and stuff like that? Yeah, so I believe there's WebSocket plugins for it. It is still primarily built on HTTP, so you'll have to get around some of the limitations of that kind of stuff. The worst case scenario, the chunk response that you get back, you can actually keep writing to that response stream. I haven't got the equivalent in C#, but I've seen plenty of demos in Node.js where you spin up because Node is a chunk response by default. You spin up a telnet client and you spin up a web server, and when you type in telnet client, it just writes that back to the response. So if you have a browser open, it gets that all sent down. You do the same thing with OWIN, so you can continuously just pump straight back down. Cool. It wouldn't surprise me if they've got it working on, if they've got Singular working on OWIN, because they're not a huge team and they're all across all of it. And, yeah. Cool.